Okay, well, it's 5 minutes past. We don't have Adam yet, but the show must go on. So we're going to get started. And Adam will be making his way in here, sure, at any time. Welcome to the R&D panel in construction. Thank you very much for joining. We have some amazing panelists today. So I'm just going to go through the agenda first, and then we'll dive into the introductions and the Q&A session. So we're going to do just a couple minutes of introductions, do 40 minutes of Q&A with the panelists. Where we can go back and forth through the different topics that are most pressing in the R&D space of construction. And then we're going to do a short demonstration of the latest features and functions of CM Builder, and then we're going to finish with a Q&A session from there. So first on the docket here is Elliot Hicks. Elliot Hicks is Project Director at Crookes Construction in Australia. Elliot is a construction engineering project director with major project experience at the front end and delivery experience in commercial high-rise, retail, defense, health, infrastructure, engineering, and aged care. Elliot is a recent product owner, innovation project director that has experience within the digital business and that is leading the strategic roadmap for the future of construction and engineering industry. He has experience in numerous years in lean manufacturing, modular construction, and can derive a certainty of delivery through a design and planned approach that has an operational excellence firmly in mind. Welcome, Elliot. Next up is Rob. Rob has been working. He's Vice President Innovation and Strategic Services at Kast Construction out of South Florida. Rob has been working in the South Florida construction industry since 2001, starting out as a field engineer, assistant project manager, and then project manager before moving into a BIM technology and operational excellence role in 2009. After transitioning back to a PM role for a few years, Rob began working at Kast in 2015 as the Director of Technical Services and is now the Vice President, Innovation and Strategic Services. The Kast Strategic Services Department believes in putting the project first and eliminating pain points for customers and Kast employees through training, technology implementation, BIM, VDC, trade coordination, Procore, and other services. Welcome, Rob. I will still introduce Adam because I'm sure he's going to make his way in here at some point. So our third panelist is Adam Cisler, R&D Manager at GLY Construction in Seattle. Adam is a member of GLY's Virtual Design and Construction Group, where he manages research and development in advanced technologies with job site applicability. He focuses on emerging XR technologies, augmented and virtual and mixed reality, and the potential impacts of and advantages in construction management. Adam is also an FAA Part 107 certified drone pilot and is currently testing drone-based terrestrial and mobile reality capture and integration with ongoing VDC operations. Other areas of interest include AI, machine learning, robotics, exoskeletons, 3D printing, blockchain technology, and the future implications for our company, for the GLY company specifically, and the industry in general in the near and distant future. Okay, let's dive into the question and answer. Elliot, you're up first, mate. I think you can answer this one pretty well and paint the picture for us. Let's go back first. Before we dive forward, let's go back. You've been in the construction industry in Australia for 20 years. In that time, you've had roles on site, in the office, experienced the general contracting business through multiple lenses. Why historically has construction been such a tough business? What are the challenges every GC faces when they're trying to scale?
Thanks, Javier. Thanks for the introduction. You said that so quickly and professionally. I think I'll start off by saying, like, from the perspective, and something that's not new to the people that dial in or the panelists, hey, it's very risky what we do. Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns in what we do. There's a lot of challenges associated with, in Australia, we just recently had, in excess of 6 weeks worth of rain. So, we deal with a lot of things that's from an, hey, Adam, you're here. Awesome.
Wow.
Hey, we move fast and break things in our R&D panel, so that's okay. This is you got to be agile. We got to be agile. So Adam, we already introduced you, man. So everyone knows you already. So all good.
All right.
Yeah, we're into the first question here. So go ahead, Elliot.
Yeah, so I think it's risky. I think there's a lot of unknowns. I think typically the construction margins are quite low with regards to sort of when you are sort of trying to tender it is highly competitive. So when we sort of look at the competitive market over here, it's not unusual that you'll be faced with 5 or 6 tenderers that you're sort of working against. And I think the supply chain that we're dealing with, we're all fishing from the same pool. So the supply chain that we're dealing with is quite limited with regards to that. Probably COVID's had an effect on that as well, with regards to people not actually being able to sort of visit other places or work in other places. I think the supply chain also from a wider perspective, especially in Australia, we are so heavily reliant on major manufacturing out of China, out of the US, and out of those sort of major ports. So I think that's a lot of risk, a lot of unknowns. In terms of why it's difficult to scale as a GC, I think if you are looking to diversify where your brand is actually going to, and actually different markets. So something that Richard Crookes has done successfully is moved into from industrial through to residential through to aged care, and that's been sort of through good management. But I think where you sort of see now in the Australian climate is that there's a lot of industrial projects sort of kicking off, and a lot of infrastructure projects, a lot of large scale government invested infrastructure projects, which has a high barrier to entry with regards to the regulatory and the safety components associated with that. But that's the deal that we're sort of up against. But I think there's a lot of sort of upside to that as well. But I'm sure we'll get to the upside. But that sort of sets the tone about why our industry is just where it is in terms of a risk profile that sort of sets us.
Well, listen, I that's great color to add in. As technologists, and I think all of us would consider ourselves to be technologists. We work in the real world, right? We're in a lot of stuff in the bits. The construction is all about the atoms, right? So there's some real, actual challenges in the business model and history and risk and all these things that are really to take into consideration as technologists. So that's great color. So Rob, you started about the same time as Elliot in your career. There's been lots of talk about productivity in construction, flat or down, especially relative to other industries. From your perspective, why do you think that's the case? And over the last 20 years, have you seen anything change? Got better, got worse? Maybe talk about productivity and how it's impacted you, the stuff that you've seen in construction.
Yeah, interestingly, I recently saw some chatter, maybe it was another podcast or some blogs or something, about how that productivity data that everybody keeps referencing is actually outdated. So the numbers that gets pulled from, that you see people throw up on presentations at conferences and stuff is actually, it's not current information. So it's kind of hard to say, if we're really as bad as they say we are. I think to the extent that there is a productivity gap or what have you in construction, for one thing, I think it's important to split that apart. And are we talking about productivity in the field and work in place and, work installed, or are we talking about the office and the back end? And then if you're averaging the two, is one of those dragging the other one down? I keep citing this call I was on a few months ago where this poor kid was talking about the process that he had to go through to submit an RFI, and he's with the GC, they're working in one system, the architect's working in another system. The client gets mad and says, okay, you guys aren't working together. Now you have to all save your stuff in my system. And I unmuted the phone and said, can we just get this kid a fax machine? Because we've literally made his job worse with computers, and he's too young to even know it. He just grew up with computers. He doesn't even know that it's gotten worse. So I think sometimes we can be our own worst enemies, in terms of productivity. On the field side, I think, again, assuming that data is accurate, I think from last what I heard, that data was kind of based around the time of the last recession, and from working through that, there was definitely, some impacts to productivity where, leading up to the recession, it was such a boom that, everybody was, and we're kind of in the same situation now, everybody was just trying to fill seats. They needed a hand to put the hammer in, they needed a pair of feet to put in the boots, they needed an ass to put in the seat. So it's hard at that point to, train, to get the people that you need, find the right people, get them in the right seats. And as we saw in the last recession, right about the time we were starting to get that figured out, the bottom dropped out and, everybody went back to get an MBA. So, I think those are the swings in the industry are kind of the reasons for productivity differences. The other thing is, I think a lot of people go into especially the trades, because they want to work with their hands. And so when you tell a guy that went into a trade because he likes working with his hands, he likes getting dirty, he likes crawling in the hole, and you go, oh no, here's this piece of equipment that can do that for you now, you're going to go sit in the office, right? The guy's kind of like, well, wasn't really interested in doing that to begin with. So I think there's some resistance in that regard to kind of what the powers that be might consider innovation or progress in the productivity side.
That's great. So I have two quick follow-ups. A good rule I was taught by someone who says, like, when deploying a process improvement, first ask yourself, does it make it better? So that's a good point you made. And the second thing, that data, I also have questions about the data, just anecdotally in my own experience on projects. When you talk to subcontractors, they're always going to tell you they lost their shirt on a job. No one wants to give the real data, right? Because they want to make it seem like, oh no, that was terrible. I got hammered on this. No one. It's like a funny thing, right? Like you almost don't want to share your actual productivity data if you're a subcontractor to your GC, because then the GC might say, wait a second. Well, then why did I pay you so much? So it's so there's there's some biases built into our process, but that's really good insight. Thank you. And so let's go over to you, Adam. Thank you for jumping through our hoops here and sticking with it. Great to have you here. So we were talking before the call. We're prepping that 2016. We were working with a customer. I remember him, became friends with him. He said he hired a big GC out of Kansas City that many of you already know, J.E. Dunn, to help with pre-con on a project in Canada, which they had not done a project there before. And I said, well, it's curious, like, why'd you pick that company? They've never worked there before. Typically, things are pretty territorial when you're doing pre-con. Oh, well, they're the only company. This guy was not from construction. He goes, the only GC we could find that had a R&D budget. That was their barrier of entry. So, Adam, how about you guys at GLY? When did you guys start really committing to having an R&D budget? And what were the drivers of that decision? I'm sure it was a big decision to start putting money to the side and saying, hey, we're going to build this R&D function and we're starting investing in this stuff.
Yeah, and I would, back up a step from, the traditional, what we're calling, R&D and all of this kind of this latest wave of innovation, and kind of dig back and just say, as far back, 2011, when BDC department at GLY started really having a huge presence on construction sites and doing coordination for, our self-performed concrete work and for just the complex buildings we're building. 2011, we were already well into, putting investment into R&D funds in that way. But in this latest wave and getting more to this kind of traditional R&D, 2014, 2013, 2014, I began asking questions as a PE. Why can't I just see the model overlaid on top of, the real world? Led to digging into the first waves of augmented reality applications and getting into, some of the game engine technology. So 2014, 2015 saw us digging into augmented reality, game engines, the gamification, all of this, and getting to the point in 2016 where I formalized the R&D department in GLY, basically doing an internal business development of the R&D department, formalizing that, and then getting a dedicated budget 2016. So right around the time frame that you're talking about. So they should have really come talk to us first in that instance that you're bringing up. Yeah, that's just a little bit there. So. You're muted.
So 2014, 2015, that seems about the time when, it's when we started, that definitely a big shift started happening. I'm going to go right back to you, Adam, on the next question. So deploying technology, right? At first, you don't know what to do because no one's ever done this before. You're a GC. Everything Elliot told you is true. It's been a low margin business. It's highly competitive, tapping into a common pool of resources. How do you differentiate yourself? So you, as a kind of lead taking over as innovation at GLY, have quite a unique approach to this that has something to do with empathy. Maybe you walk us through a little bit how you've deployed technologies and what are some of the strategies you've used to be successful?
Yeah, definitely. In that, empathy being a key driver, creativity tied directly to that. Essentially, coming up through the field as a carpenter, coming up, through the PE ranks, project engineering ranks. I have a distinct understanding what it takes in the field to build the building, what it takes in the office side to build the building. So then I also can, wash these, emerging and innovative technologies through the filter and through this empathetic lens of the people that I'm trying to get to deploy and actually get traction with some of these innovations. So I'm really able to put myself in their shoes, walk through how would they view this? Is it really going to help them? And it helps me analyze the innovation to get closer to an actual tool that I'm delivering to them versus, hey, this is just an experiment. That's not to say, that there isn't the need for something that's completely brand new, like flashy. This thing is like really new. There is always going to be that need to have your champions on your projects who are, you've identified through basically sourcing those creative individuals on your projects. But so you're going to have like different stages of R&D where you're going to have those kind of real quick tests like, hey, do you mind if I show you something real quick? Can I get your take on something? Right. And you're talking like an hour engagement, half-hour engagement to really do a quick sniff test to see if you even want to move forward. And then as you move into more pointed proof of concepts, that sort of thing, that's where you really have to take into account what their role is, how this is going to affect them, because they're already doing, a 10, 12-hour day sometimes. And to add one more thing to their plate is just going to, cause that innovation to take longer to take root. So yeah, empathizing with their position and empathizing with the workload that they're currently under. And that's where, my experience and, allows me to creatively approach that.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I've seen a bit of a trend. You definitely need fresh set of eyes and fresh views coming into the industry, and even youngsters that have just like, they don't have biases and stuff like that. But definitely I've seen a trend that the most successful organizations seem to have people who been on site in the past or have solved some of the problems they're trying, or had the problem they're trying to solve in the past, which makes a lot of sense. I'm going to jump back over to you, Elliot. Let's go down under. So how do R&D budgets and approaches differ across different GCs of scale, right? So you've worked at very, very large companies, you worked at, mid-market, maybe you can talk a bit about, how innovation is seen differently across the sectors you operate too, like private sector versus public. And because innovation, some people see that as risk or unknown, right? And, maybe public sector don't like that. I don't know. Maybe can you walk us through what you've seen in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have worked, at Panelist, and I have worked at, Richard Crookes, and just recently started here probably about 3 months ago. They are different in terms of the approach, but I think really what they sort of have a commonality across is it's really driven around a sole focus about what they actually want to achieve. And they're two different types of businesses, different types of businesses at scale and different types of business about what they're actually wanting to achieve across innovation and R&D. I suppose from the commonality that we sort of see across those two businesses is that it's all about upskilling our individuals within our organisation, but it's also an outwardly facing focus about how we are going to be an innovation, a disruptor, and what's our unique business offering when we do come to play in those various sectors. I think from those various sectors across residential, commercial, and government-based projects, what we are seeing is that the residential market probably is seeing a bit more innovation than what it traditionally did, and that's all about this idea around place and this idea about this location that you are spending a lot more time in now. With COVID sort of affecting sort of where you sort of did a lot of your work, it became really your home office, and your home office generally wasn't in your retail or wasn't in your sort of residential fix, but now it really forms a sort of a nook within your environment. So it's really sort of looking at sort of how innovative we can sort of be in that residential market. Across the commercial, I think that's really down to revenue and the revenue streams associated with that, how innovative you can be. In the commercial space in Sydney, we are sort of positioning ourselves at a high premium type of market. So it's obviously looking at attracting those clients back to commercial, after coming out of the COVID environment, to really sort of really go back and invest within commercial real estate. And then from a government-based perspective, really that's setting the regulatory environment about how innovation actually plays within the market. I think government really have a key role with regards to that. Government's really been a key advocate across safety and really some of those drivers about how the workforce is actually becoming more safer, more productive. So I think from that perspective, government really has I think it has a responsibility, yes, but I think it also is a main driver about how the innovation across the industry is lifted.
Let me double click on that just for a sec. I know the last project you were working on before you're starting your new roles, I believe about 1.2 billion or so, larger than a billion. Very complicated existing, conditions, new towers. Did you guys have a dedicated like innovation budget, or was it something that where you were just looking at planning the job and saying, hey, here are some risks. Let's carve some money out here to address these risks. Like, how did you guys plan, capital into that?
Yeah, so I think it was probably the latter. So I think we sort of knew that it was a risky project. The project is a mixed development with government and with private equity. So I think from that side of it, it was looking to carve out money to obviously showcase value not only to our government client but also to our private investors. And really it sort of lent itself because the aspiration of the project was so high. And a lot of projects sort of share that aspiration about world first, industry leading, all these sort of colloquialisms that you sort of hear around the project. But this really was a project that was destined for success in that mind. And I think it really sort of needed that investment across the R&D and innovation to actually lift it. And the sole focus and was really driven to a point about our sequencing, our certainty of delivery, and how we can increase that worker communication across those sort of high risk activities.
That's really good. So how about you, Rob? And when you guys are planning R&D budgets, as you do some of what Elliot was mentioning as a high-end builder, and in Florida, and Miami's just like blowing up right now. For the few people that don't know, Miami's on fire. I'm sure that's affecting you guys. Like, how do you guys deploy R&D budgets? Are you looking, and how do you look at that? You're just you're muted. There.
There we go. Figured nobody wanted to listen to me coughing. Yeah, I mean, we've sort of, I think generally for sort of all of our operations, we've kind of, a lot of us here have kind of started to put things in sort of a hierarchical list as a general concept of, what the order in which things matter. So it's safety, quality, budget, and schedule, right? If you can't do any of it if you're not safe, right? If you have a major accident, job gets shut down, you've got problems. And then as long as you're maintaining, the necessary levels of quality, you're going to do a better job of meeting your budget and your schedule. And, it's actually a question, I probably shouldn't say it on an open webinar. It's a question we ask people in interview process, kind of take these terms and put them in order. I'm giving away the answer now.
Yeah,
but, I think historically construction is almost turned that on its head. It's like some places are just, pounding the schedule in the hopes that that's somehow going to get them ahead of their budget. And then nobody cares about quality, and safety only matters if somebody gets hurt, so it's, we've kind of tried to turn that on its head. And I think our R&D and our innovation tries to sort of follow along with that, and I would say, things like, MEP coordination and trade coordination really falls in that quality bucket. Some people have looked at that list and said, oh, well, where does BIM fit in this? Where does those kinds of technologies fit in this? And I think they fit in that quality budget. Or that quality bucket. So for us, that's kind of how we try to prioritize things. And then the other side of that equation then is also like, Adam hit on it a little bit. Elliot talked about like slim margins, what really matters to the field, as a former PM, I try to keep that in mind whenever I can. Like, the best technology in the world that doesn't help somebody go home earlier or, make them not have to work a weekend or something like that, it's kind of a hard sell. So you've always got to be keeping in mind, like, the best tech often solves the smallest problem for the largest number of people. So something really small, seemingly really small, if it affects your entire organization. We recently got an Office 365, so we picked up Teams and OneNote and all these things. And like, it's just probably, especially for people outside of construction, it's a stupid little thing. Like, how can you not be on Office 365 already? But for us, I'm doing a webinar tomorrow on how to use Teams. I don't know how to use Teams. I'm just kind of the guy that knows maybe the most about it. So I think those are kind of our two drivers from the corporate level: safety, quality, budget, schedule, and then on the field side is what benefits the individual. What can we do to actually help? Like you said in my intro, clients, design partner, subs, the individual person, finding out what makes them tick and what their individual pain points are. Because usually there's 30 other guys that just haven't said anything yet, You
just got there first. My next follow-up question is kind of nice because a question just came in from N Bassett, so I don't know your full name, which is exactly what I was about to ask. So how do you get buy-in when going to key stakeholders? Let's just to benefit this question, let's say leadership in the company, they maybe aren't as technologically aware. How do you kind of like communicate the need to invest in this stuff? Can you quantify some of this stuff? As we all know, is not easily quantifiable, like from an ROI perspective. So, do you have some strategies that you've used to try to get people to buy into this or win over stakeholders?
Well, it's interesting because I think just about everywhere I've worked, we've had that challenge to one degree or another. Like the person making the decision, especially financially, is so far removed from the person that it benefits. And you need people, Adam talked about it a few minutes ago, you need somebody in the middle that can like translate up and down, because somebody in the field may ask for a piece of software or technology that's $5,000. And the person at the other end of the spectrum is like, $5,000, what do I need that for? I'm paying you, and there's a disconnect there, not understanding that aspect. So I've sort of relied on going out and rabble rousing a little bit, like your best effort is oftentimes they may not listen to you, especially if you're in an innovation role. They may see you as the computer guy or the geek or the nerd or whatever, like, oh, he just wants a new toy. But when you've got like a 60-year-old superintendent that you've shown the value in something, and he's calling the office saying, hey, that guy showed me this drone thing and I need it, that all of a sudden starts to register on sort of the higher ups and the powers that be. And you get 3, 4, 5 of those people, that understand the value. And suddenly it's not just you. Now it's someone else asking. Some of our biggest change, like leaps forward, Office 365 is a great example. I've been asking for it since I got here. Didn't hear anything. We had a big company meeting and suddenly 30 of the leadership of the top leaders within our company are in one room and they're all raising their hands going, how come we don't have this yet? 2 weeks later, Office 365, so some of it is that it's still a people business. You got to go out and meet people where they're at, find out what their pain points are, and be careful that you're not championing something that's just for you or just what you think is what's best for the company. You really need kind of a groundswell of people behind you.
That's great. You said something that really resonated. I think, there'll be technological people will come into the industry making waves from outside. But the thing that makes that I think that it's not the ninjas, it's not the tech folks, it's the 50, 60-year-old superintendent, senior project manager that starts using Procore or these tools and starts realizing paperless and starts using digital planning, 3D, 4D. Those are the ones that have a chance to really make a huge impact, right? So, and the more that they come across, come to the dark side, the tech side, the more is like, you're never going back, right? This is never going to work the way you used to work. That's great. Adam, jumping over to you. Know you're passionate about VR, XR. You alluded to this a little bit earlier, and its application for a GC business. Can you talk a bit more about that and also any other technologies you're super excited about in the future?
Yeah, definitely. Looking at all of these emerging technologies, since I got traction and interest 2013, 2014, just looking at how all of the technologies are beginning to converge. It's not just any one technology, and it ties actually into that question about justifying R&D budgets as well. So I'll just kind of tie the thread. Making sure that you're bringing to leadership offensive and defensive positioning on the thing. Like, start with defensive if that's what you need, stating, our competitors are doing X, Y, and Z, and you can just do some quick internet research on what's happening there. But the other part, that I like to bring into it is having this kind of offensive strategy to R&D and innovation, where you might not have an exact thing or technology that you're trying to do, but you're advocating for a budget for that flexibility as things come up, so that you can start providing access and opportunity, to those people in the field. So when somebody in the field, that 40, 50-year veteran, has that idea, you can pull from some reserves that you've already kind of designated for this is R&D, and it does take some advocating and fighting for. But that's, kind of where I started. That's why I wanted to drop back to that. But the things I'm excited about, are things to really keep an eye on are, if you're looking at the advancements in self-driving cars, well, that's all predicated, on LiDAR, which the miniaturization of LiDAR has made its way into the iPads, the iPhones, right? It gets into this broader spectrum reality capture bucket that we're all looking at with all the 360 cameras, which then that has the implications with AI, because AI is parsing through all of that data in that broader self-driving car kind of vertical, but also in this 360 photo and 360 video walkthrough thing. So as these cameras become more ubiquitous, as the LiDAR becomes more ubiquitous, and AI becomes closer to what's known as general intelligence, right? All of these parts and pieces that are working in this focused artificial intelligence right now, will at some point converge into this general intelligence. That's what Elon Musk is going on about. Hey, he's saying 5 years now, we better worry. But I think that what we're going to be able to do, if we're on top of it, and we're thinking about technology and innovation from an equitable standpoint, right, where we're empathizing and being creative about all of this, we can turn this not only into cost savings on projects, but also create new forms of jobs and new forms of work that will benefit the societies and the neighborhoods that we're building in, right? So that, we're actually seeing this industry 4.0 elevate society. So I kind of like to go lofty, when I'm talking about innovation, because it may look like we're just dealing with the cool thing right now, but AR, VR, all of these things, the metaverse, Web3, I'm just buzzwording you right now, but all of these things are interconnected and they're all evolving. It's never going to be less complicated than it is right now. It's only getting more complicated. So R&D construction is definitely needed right this minute. So start having those conversations about budget. Start having conversations about how well you're prepared, to take on these new things. So that's my 2 cents. I can keep going, but I want to hear what the other folks have to say too.
That's great. That was such a good answer. You turned the lights out on Elliot's back there. Try to keep the cost down. It's good. Talk about cost savings. So no, I want to kind of, so you're talking about XR, LiDAR, AI. I'm sure. Back to like Rob, back to you real quick. So these are concepts that are tough to sell to upper management that don't understand. Speaking for a friend, asking for a friend, how can solution providers help you make a better case internally, right? Like what can people building these products do to make it easier for you to get adoption through your organization?
I think when you get in front of somebody in the seat like the three of us have, is you really got to spend more time listening than talking, especially at first from a sales perspective. That seems to be a disappearing trait in the technology sales world. You get on a call with somebody and they just want to launch into telling you all the ways they can help you without knowing what it is your problems are or what you need help with. And I've actually had a couple calls with various technology salespeople that we've gotten about halfway through the call and they've listened to some stuff and they've gone, listen, we don't actually fix your problem right now. And it's almost funny. It's like, getting rejected by the girl you didn't know you liked. All of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. No. I do want to use your tool. Please don't hang up. But, not everything is a fit. It's there's a reason that there's different solutions, even for the same problems, is people have got to find their own fit. We're looking at a couple solutions for like labor planning. And, there's kind of two main softwares out there. I won't name them. I'm sure everybody knows who they are, but figuring out which one of those is best for you based on their benefits. And one of them was one of those softwares that kind of told us like, look, we're not really set up for what you guys are trying to do. We're trying to get there, but we're not set up yet. And I really appreciated that honesty. So I think the listening and really understanding like, hey, having a list in your own mind as a provider of here's the things that we think we can solve for, but then listening to the potential customer and saying, okay, none of the stuff they said is on that list and it's not anything new, and being willing to just go, hey, listen, do you mind if I check back in 6 months? And be willing to move on, as opposed to, trying to meet a sales goal or wherever it may be, get to your next round of funding or what everybody's looking for. That's where I think the true success is.
Product market fit in construction is not easy. There's a interesting stat: 95% of companies in North America, construction companies in North America, have 100 people or less, right? So you're going to have a lot of different opinions on how to solve problems. Elliot, I know one thing that's really cool about having a more global panel is, like, for those who don't know about the Australian construction industry, they, Rob talked a bit about safety. They take safety extremely seriously in Australia, especially the stuff that Elliot's doing. So what are some of the growing trends in construction innovation? And we've done, simulation is a big part of that, but what do you see are some of the big kind of growing trends in construction, and maybe more contextual to the Australian market?
Yes, I think, I know Adam spoke a lot about sort of the sort of growing needs for tech, but I think we sort of summarize it in terms of 3 buckets. So that's in the communication, the visualization and automation sort of bucket. So from a communication perspective, like our construction sites are so vast, they're so dense, like it's just obviously how we obviously get effective communication across those construction sites. So looking at LiDAR, looking at sort of this idea around cameras, 360, making that sort of construction site really seem far more connected than what it actually possibly is, rather than just relying on a UHF radio between the person in the office and the person out in the field. The visualization, we've done a lot within that space. And we've collaborated a lot with CAD makers in that space about sort of how we can do that 4D sequencing and simulation a lot. And we've really seen the power of that to really, from a workforce perspective, when you can give them that daily playbook and you can sort of say, well, this is what you're doing today. If something goes bump of the night, this is what you're doing tomorrow. So it really sort of takes the guesswork out of what you are actually doing, and then linking that to a program defines where your critical path is to ensure that you're always meeting those early or middle or late milestones across your project in a safe and visual way. I think the automation piece, I think there's a lot of growth in that space. Are we ready for robotics just yet? We are in an environment that is highly industrial here in Australia as well, so quite parochial. So I think that probably has a bit to sort of go as well. But I think definitely the industry is up for it. I think there's a lot of sort of space with leading tech companies or lift companies like Schindler that are looking at Schindler Rise and robotics associated with that. Hilti are looking at the Jybot, which sort of looks at sort of semi-autonomous drilling sort of aspects of what they can do. So I think there is a growing move for that. I think the new trend that we're sort of seeing, and I'm really interested in, is supply chain mapping and supply chain management. Because we are an island over here, everything is so dependent on planes, on ships, on cargo. And if you've tried to buy a shipping container lately, it's gone from like $3,000 a shipping container to like $13,000 a shipping container. So from our perspective, it's actually following through the manufacturing production perspective and actually understanding when it's going to be on site. And the sites that we deal with are quite constrained. Inner city CBD environments, which I'm sure Rob and Adam have experienced as well. And they're dealing with this method of trying to change that 50 and 60-year-old person that says, hey, I'd rather be looking at it than looking for it. And I'm going, well, okay, but you don't have space to do that. So therefore you need to manage your logistics a lot more and to really sort of combat that just-in-time management or thinking associated with that. So tracking logistics, there's a lot of sort of tracking and logistic management software that we're seeing, and I think that's a growing trend.
That's great. I'm going to go off script a little bit because Jeff Olafson from Gardon asked a great question that I know you're the best one to answer because of your company history. So the question is, do you think that construction companies in the future will require a CIO to be part of their corporate company strategy, so a chief information officer? Do you see this as like a critical part of a construction company corporate structure moving forward? Elliot, you had one in your past life, so interesting.
I think it's a great question. I think the benefit that they provide is really this probably that sort of halfway, well, not halfway house, probably that mid-tier sort of level in terms of support as you sort of go further up into the C-suite. And I think that's really the advocate for change. It is driven from the grassroots. I think there's a lot of advocate for change that are driven. And I think realistically, as an industry, we innovate on a day-to-day basis. We probably just don't capture it as much. And then that goes back to that first sort of comment that we're talking about, that we sort of see these downward trends. But I think we aren't capturing enough of that information. I think as a gateway, a CIO would be great because I think that really sort of pulls in the best of the best and really can disseminate that to say, hey, we want to innovate. We want to start first. We want to sort of, that whole innovation concept of fail fast and learn from that. I think the CIO really would provide a lot of information, really sets that rigor and that framework about how you operate and that governance and that process that, I previously had in another organization. But I think, that's where you sort of really see the ability of a CIO to really set that framework, set that governance and set that operating structure. And that really then instills a change of culture slowly about how you actually then start bringing on new people towards that. And it probably goes to attraction and retention. But I think that's a big part of what we need to do as a differentiator, because we need to, obviously, from a skill set perspective, skills in this industry are sort of not as well they used to be. And I think that's what we need to look at from attraction and retention perspective.
Well, I tweaked the question there and that's great insights. Like if you have a CIO, it's a signal to the market. I suppose when you are recruiting, you take this stuff seriously, right? The data is the new oil. It's got value, and it's important for every organization. So that's a great point to tie in recruiting to that as a way to differentiate yourself in a market when you're looking for skilled labor. Okay, last question for Adam. Fun fact for those who don't know: the painting behind Adam was drawn by a robot using OpenAI. Just kidding. Adam is an artist himself, and not just a technologist. Can you talk a bit about a story where your artwork somehow found its way in a completed Amazon building that GLY built?
Yeah, definitely. First, I'll give a shout out to the artist from behind me. This is Hannah Olson, another one of GLY.
Oh, fantastic.
She's an artist, started as a contract administrator, worked her way, now she's a project engineer. So just another way that, GLY is kind of fostering, creative-minded people, trying to work them into different positions, because we need creative minds all throughout the strata of the company. I just want to give a shout out to Hannah Olson. If you Google her in Seattle, you find a nice website there. But myself, I'm going to drop something in the chat here. It's just a link to an article, if I can find it here. Yep, and it's essentially, I was project engineer on one of Vulcan's buildings. It's a developer in Seattle here, GLY built in South Lake Union. I was doing the complete envelope, curtain wall, again, project engineer, all the roofing, the entire exterior package. But, from this place of being a really good listener, working directly with the architect, hearing, that some of the artwork in the building, they were having issues sourcing it or getting certain pieces. Well, I used some of this early augmented reality in 2014 to show some ideas that I had, which actually got buy-in from the design team and from the developer. And then I went into production and actually made some 2 14-foot by 2-foot light boxes in this breezeway in what's now one of Amazon's buildings in South Lake Union. I have a nice little name plaque on there. So it's just one of those things where creativity and listening really kind of key in and create some really good opportunities and synergies. So I'm gonna send a link to this article.
Yeah, check it out. Thank you. The artists and technologists. For those who don't know, the world famous Pedro Souza, who's on this call, he's the customer success manager, CM Builder, also an artist. He's got a big band big in Brazil. So anyways, it's good to connect those two things. Last question for Rob, and then we're going to dive into a quick demo of the new stuff. What do you think from what is the most exciting projects you're spearheading at Kast currently? And maybe you can get a chance to talk about industry trends that you're most excited about in the future.
Yeah, I think the thing that's maybe oddly enough got me the most excited is the labor shortage and finding things that address the labor shortage. I may have touched on it earlier, but we're not, kind of back to the productivity thing. The industry is not terribly motivated to look for ways to improve efficiency when we're printing money, and we're kind of in right now a bit of a printing money phase, but we're kind of getting to a balloon stretched really thin phase. And suddenly 6 months ago or 2 years ago, if the pre-con department said, look, we can only bid 10 jobs at a time, we said, okay, great, we need to bid 12 jobs at a time, we're going to add a person. Well, now you can't do that, right? It could take 6 months to find that qualified person. And so the only way to really then start to maximize that becomes internal efficiencies, and starting to look at like, why are there so many printed plans floating around the office? You know, why are we estimating a certain way versus another way? You know, same thing goes for, you know, job site project management and superintendent stuff, like the change to digital plans and being able to have drawings in your iPad and your phone. Like, people don't think about that as a productivity boost, but it's huge to not have to come back down 30 stories to get your permit set of drawings to show the inspector, yes, that's really supposed to be 6 feet. So that's where I'm focused on right now. And what I'm kind of, I guess, weirdly excited about is the possibility of making some real forward strides in terms of you know, company efficiency, but also the individual efficiency. And again, finding out those tedious tasks from people and what can we do to eliminate that. My big thing right now is reporting should not be a job function. No one should be doing work and then stopping doing work just to type things into a box for some other guy to put in a drawer. Do we have the technology, right? Like Steve Austin, we can build him stronger, faster, smarter, however it went. So why can't we just do the work and have the report generate itself that we're doing the work, and not have someone stop working to generate a report? So, you know, we're trying to get more stuff into Power BI. It's a question to your earlier question, like it's a question I ask almost everybody we talk to from a technology company. You know, product's great, yada, yada, yada. What do you have for reporting? What can we do in Power BI? What can we do to get your data into Power BI and layer that on top of Procore, Navisworks, Revit, you know, all these other tools, so we can really start to look at all that stuff together rather than just, you know, here's your monthly financial report. You go and type it in all these boxes and then you send it into the office that no one looks at. Like, if we're going to report, let's report and do something with the data. And why should we, then that function really should be automated.
Great insight. Never waste a crisis, as they say. Everyone knows that side of it, but the other side is that it's hard making tough decisions when the market's strong. And before I started this company, we worked in the mining business, and it's, you know, it goes up. Elliot probably knows a bit of that in Australia. You know, you have boom cycles, and then you have down cycles. And when things are good, everyone tends to overspend and get a little fat, and you know, and it's hard to make tough decisions when things are going well in the market, right? But that's what you have to do to drive that operational efficiency. It's great. So insight, we're going to start doing a little bit of a demo here. Ishu, want to show some of the latest features and functions of CM Builder. So we got Ishu, Senior Product Specialist. He's going to share his screen. He's going to click, and I'm going to talk. So very quickly, what's the big insight? You know, you mentioned there, Rob, on your side. The big insight for CM Builder. CM Builder is a 100% web-based construction planning and simulation product. Okay, and the insight we had was that you can just start kind of clicking through, and I'll talk. Is that as BIM and digital technologies are becoming more and more pervasive in the design phase, it became very evident talking to back to what Rob said, starting with the problem and working backwards. It became very evident that general contractors, subcontractors are looking for a light, fast, easy, high value, low effort, low total cost solution to consume some of that information from the design side and apply temporary resources, look at factors like safety, apply your schedule, your sequencing, and analyze the build, right? And then be able to share that with stakeholders to win them over, right? So the ability to communicate a plan or multiple scenarios. What does it look like with one crane versus two cranes? What does it look like if we do excavation north to south, south to west? What if we use shoring versus sloped excavation, right? So right here, what we're seeing is a customer of ours, Rise Alliance, who's is rebranding as Hovercraft Builders. It says King George project in Surrey, British Columbia. A pretty amazing job that they've been able to tie together the program, all the temporary resources that need to go to support this, and then visual references communicating to stakeholders where the cycle, you know, in 3D and 4D, where they're going to be at in the cycle of the project, right? So when we topped off, where are you at with the facade? You talked about supply chain, Elliot. Planning that supply chain to make sure you have the facade as weather tight as you can behind the shoring and the slabs, and then looking at when the interior work's going to start, right? Because everything about this market is finishing things as fast as you can, time, value, money, and safety, as you mentioned. So if you go over into the excavation side, CM Builder makes it really easy. Some of the biggest innovations we've pushed in the product in the last little while have been around communicating things below the ground, right? So there's a lot of tools that allow you to do things in PDF editors and Excel and stuff like that. Pretty tricky when you start going down, right? In the third dimension down. So And this is a great little simulation here done on the King George project where they wanted to study, okay, how are you going to get people in and out of the hole? Where are you going to be, what's the planning and where's the staging area going to be for concrete pump trucks and these kind of things to be able to plan out, pouring the core footings and that kind of stuff and installing the crane, where's that crane going to go and so on and so forth. So a really nice way to just, it's really fast and easy to do this all inside CM Builder. So we're going to switch over to a little bit of the new stuff. So starting a project from scratch, a couple new things. You enter the project name, you enter the address. You have a few different new features that have come in the last few weeks. Our product velocity has been amazing. Just big shout out to the product team. So you now can define the thickness of your map. So if you're doing, Elliot's past life, maybe doing a subterranean train station, we used to only have a certain thickness a fixed thickness of the map. Now you can go down to, I think it's 200 or 300 feet. So it can handle most of your deep excavation type stuff. You pick a map tile size, you go from there, hit next. You can choose you invite your users with permissions and everything to bring that in. And then what you're going to do is go into your project page where you can start running your scenarios, right? So the first scenario we're going to run, we give it a name, figure out if you have models coming in and what's going to happen inside CM Builder with that address you put in. It's going to generate that map tile and all the surrounding buildings of your site automatically. So within a couple minutes, you're off to the races. You can start planning your logistics. Okay. So moving over to the next one. Oh, sorry, there's a couple of additional features here with lighting. So now you can play with the view angle of you can add shadows, change the lighting depending on how you want to look at it. You can change the back to having like more of a nighttime look versus a daytime look, et cetera, et cetera. These are all fairly recent additions to the product. So let's get started from scratch. One of the biggest new pushes that is, well, actually what you're showing there, it's okay. That's why it's R&D. It's an R&D panel. We're allowed to go. I'm allowed to be off script here. But so as you can see there, we have added a completely different way that you access the resource catalog. So CM Builder has hundreds and hundreds of parametric and non-parametric temporary resources available for your use. So you don't have to bring in your own temporary resources, this kind of things. And we've made available simplified parametric modeling tools like you sketch a line, generate a fence, put a point, generate an excavator. So this is all kind of really simple. And then next thing, so that whole interface for the resources has changed. You could do deep search. Now what you're going to do is import your schedule. So this is what a number one feature has been requested by our customers is linking the schedule. So grab your XML schedule and then like what happens when you're doing site logistics, the biggest feedback we've gotten from customers, you may have like Elliot has a 1,500 line schedule. You don't need 1,500 lines when you're communicating to, your project team or a city inspector, et cetera, right? You want to be able to show the sequencing at a granularity that makes sense for the idea of like understanding the sequence. So what you can do very easily now is just go into that XML schedule, pick the dates and the milestones you want. And with a few clicks, you automatically generate your milestones and you're off to the races. So before, you can also do this manually, but before you had to kind of pick the dates and set that up manually. So let's hit go. And there you go. So we've automatically created all our milestones and the dates that you need. Now we're also making a bunch of changes to that top bar recently, or upcoming soon. We're going to have a lot more features just on how you handle the milestones. But there you go. So you've created all your milestones. And now you're off to the races. You can start doing your simulation. So we've got an idea of searching, a gate. Let's think about access coming into the site. So this is kind of sweet. So you kind of just, as you can see, you're highlighting the resource now as you place it. Before we didn't have the highlight, and then you can just easily adjust that parameter of that resource directly in your browser. So one of the key differentiators here is there's no locally installed software at all. All the authoring, the simulating, bringing in of data, schedules, models, it's all happening directly in your web browser in the CM Builder engine. And as you can see, was pushed, I think, last week, the ability to just grab right from a deep search of all your catalog. You just, search trailer. You don't have to go into the actual subcategory and you can just start adding things there. You also may notice on the right for premium and enterprise customers, we've added branding. So on the right there, you can see you can now tag those resources automatically with your logos and start branding the site with your kind of your company information. Now, one other use case there is branding it with your client's information. So used in pursuit, it can be nice, right, to add your client's information onto that. So next, what we're going to do, we're going to wrap this up in about a minute here. We're at the hour. So let's just do a couple more here. Excavation. We've added a few more features to excavation, like you'll be able to kind of control the sloping of each sides of excavation. and start getting into their also drawing projection. We should talk about drawing projection. So before you could only overlay your 2D drawing. Now you have the choice here. If you can see project on terrain, if you choose project on terrain, the top of the map, it could be a drone image, it could be any type of imported information, becomes the top of the map. So if you have a very high resolution output from your drone, Rob and his team likes to do that. You get lots of information. You fly the site, you get a bunch of data, right? You might get a 3D FBX, let's say, of the surrounding buildings. You can bring that in. You have a drone image, you can overlay. And the nice thing about the drone overlay, or the drawing overlay, is it becomes the top of the map. As you can see, now we're cutting away into the drawing, right? So it's taking away that element. Okay, so next we're gonna have to tighten this up. There you go. So we'll add one more cut from the schedule, so you can see now we're automatically doing stuff inside the milestones, and it's tracking from the XML import. And the nice thing was, as you're doing this, is you're getting some information, some data, which will show you on a completed excavation, and it's shareable by anyone. So we're going to finish this next one, and just issue because we're kind of out of time. We had to go. The questions were pretty good this time. So you can see how easy it is to kind of start modeling excavation and moving the mouse through the milestones, adding different kind of elements from that, showing elements from your BIM model, turning them on when you need them based on your schedule, and then linking it to the milestones, and then adding, say, concrete pump trucks and different information. Why don't we finish with going to the final the excavation, just because we went a little over. So let's to the final excavation, not this one, maybe the final cut and fill excavation. And did you have it? There you go, the cut and fill one. So this is a final one. The nice thing about it is, so this is like a completed one. If you want to just pull it up, you can show some of the data that you get from this. Like you get a full report per cut, how much loose volume, compact volume, soil. It's all being calculated automatically as you're doing your excavation work. You can apply a swell factor, and soon you'll be able to plan how many trucks you need to move that dirt. You can export that Excel and a few other things. So let's just go ahead and share that, drop it in the chat, and everyone can take a look at that, and then we'll just wrap there. So the main things are schedule import, highlighting temporary resources, additional functionality in excavation, the deep search and new UI for the catalog resources, and a whole bunch of new resources in there, parametric and non-parametric. And then, of course, we'll drop this in the chat. I think maybe Shruti, you can help push this to everyone else, make sure everyone can access that. And then you can send a link to anyone. They don't have to have credentials. They can open it up and visualize it from there. Okay, so we're 2 minutes over. Maybe we can stick for another 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to ask one question from the group here, if you don't mind. Let's go into the Q&A. Pedro, what do we got? This Q&A here. Let's ask one of them. So I'm going to ask one question, then because we're a couple minutes over, and then we'll go. So maybe go to Rob. How much are the people on site involved with R&D in the process in general? So in your role, you came from the site, but today, how much do you involve people from on site in the R&D process?
Completely. I really see our role as, we try to attend webinars like this when we're not speaking at them. But we really try to get educated on what's available out there. And, it's to a certain extent, it's a throw it at the wall and see what'll stick. We try to take the giant world of contact, boil it down to what we think might be applicable to our people and what we do. And then, we try to either, make them aware of what's available. Like we've done some webinars recently around drones and 360 photos that, all of a sudden we get this big upswell of people that are interested. You take for granted what you think people already know about, like how could you not know what drones do? And then you tell them and they go, oh my God, yes, give me that. So that's one way, is us sort of educating them what's available and let them decide where that solves their problems. And the other is getting out and talking to them and hearing from them and, figuring out what their challenges and pain points are. It's been almost 7 years since I've run a project. From what people tell me, it's changed. So we had try to keep in touch and, keep a finger on the pulse of what the challenges they're facing today are and what we can do. And, where you go, oh, I see you're having a problem with this. Great. We have a solution for that. Which, by the way, for our department may not be a piece of software. It may be that they need training. It may be that we've got 2 guys on staff that plug into jobs temporarily, to handle things like submittals and project startup and things like that. So if that's the challenge they're having, let's plug in and do that. And then those guys get a chance to report back to me hey, they're not kidding. This really sucks. You know, let's find a way to not do that anymore, or to try to fix it. So for us, it's integral. It's really all about that.
Okay, and I know we're pushing it here. We'll do one more for Adam, from David Laley. Do you find it more helpful to work within the project budget or separate from work you will be paid for? Thoughts on R&D budgets. Do you find it more helpful to work within the project budget or have a separate R&D budget for work you'll be paid for? Investing outside a project seems to be all sunk costs, but less risky to your business deliverables and reputation. So what are your thoughts on that?
Question.
On the project or separate?
One of the things to try and do is, if you can project cost it if it's specific to that project. But, one of the things I like to do and I like to express, getting back to the last question about the field, right? There's something the field needs. It may be something that's not in an existing budget. That's where I talked about earlier, creating access and opportunity. So I like to advocate for having budget for, maybe it does come out of the overall, say, GLY overhead budget, but it's at the benefit of our overall education, right? And any dollar spent towards fostering one of our field supervisors or one of our PEs to grow and experiment into a certain direction ends up being worth it for the intelligence we get back from that, which can then feed future budgets or inform future project level budgets. So it comes to, a blend of both. And I would say that, I personally have had a R&D budget, for since 2014, 2015, and I'm always coming in under that budget, allowing for that flexibility to ramp something up, right? I am a little more conservative, and that comes from a deep kind of understanding of where the technology is, where the value to cost ratio is, and that's where we're working with those startups, which I think each one, Elliot and Robert, both hit on that, working with those startups to get those products at the best value come from. You don't necessarily have to spend all the money to get all the value. So having a blend of both, I would go with both.
No, I'll just wrap with saying, often people, when you do innovation, technology R&D, the people in the field may feel somewhat defensive. Oh, you're trying to get rid of me or trying to reduce, my impact here. When you get them involved with it, right? If you can involve the people that you're trying to help enhance with technology as part of the R&D budget, or even having a bidirectional feedback loop, I think I've seen it have higher success in terms of that person's buy-in, right? So that's great. So listen, we pushed it 7 minutes. I wish we could have gone 90 minutes. This one was too good. Get feedback. We'll do our own feedback loop for next time. I think we got to go longer. Elliot, Rob, Adam, this was amazing. Thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule, especially Elliot. It's early down under. I hope did you get the flat white I sent you? Just kidding. I'm not sure. Shruti, did you do that? Just kidding. But anyways, have a great day, everyone, and thanks for doing this. And R&D is here to stay. So I'm glad for everyone's embracing this and going on forward. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Javier.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks everybody for showing up.
Bye now.